The snow did not announce itself. It arrived in the night, light as ash, settling into corners and seams without sound. By morning, the valley looked unchanged at first glance. Pines stood where they always had. The creek still whispered beneath its thin skin of ice. Cabins sat low against the land, their roofs pale and waiting. Only the quiet had deepened. Jonah Hail noticed that quiet before he felt the cold. He stood at the edge of the clearing, boots half buried, breath slow and careful. He was 17 years old, tall for his age but still narrow through the shoulders, with hands already roughened by work that never asked if he was ready. His wool coat hung loose, patched twice at the elbows. A shepherd mix dog sat beside him, ears alert, tail still. The dog did not shiver. That mattered. Jonah watched the way snow gathered, not how much fell but where it stayed. Along the fence line, drifts leaned inward. Near the creek, the ground showed through in dark, damp curves. Beneath the oldest pines, the snow lay thin and even, like a blanket pulled tight. Most people looked at snowfall and thought of roofs. Jonah thought of ground. His father used to say, the land spoke first to those willing to stand still. Jonah had learned that lesson early, standing beside a man who never hurried his steps and never raised his voice. But his father had been gone 2 winters now, taken by a sickness that came quietly and stayed. Since then, Jonah had learned to listen alone. Behind him, the settlement stirred. Doors opened. Smoke climbed. Men moved fast, already feeding fires that would need tending all day. Winter had a way of turning motion into panic if you let it. Jonah did not move. The dog shifted closer, leaning lightly against his leg. Jonah rested a hand on its head, felt the steady warmth there, the calm. The dog trusted the stillness. Jonah took that as a sign. He had chosen this place weeks ago, long before the snow came. Not the clearing where others built, not the ridge with its wide view and biting wind, but a shallow hollow just beyond the tree line, where the earth dipped and the trees grew older and closer together. The pines there were massive, their trunks thick and scarred, their roots lifting the ground in slow, patient waves. People said nothing good grew in tight places. Jonah disagreed. He stepped forward, breaking the untouched snow with care. Each step was measured, not to save energy, but to feel how the ground answered. Firm beneath the pines, dry. The frost sat shallow here, held at bay by needles and time. This was where he would build. He did not call it a cabin in his mind. Not yet. It was only a shape, an idea, something low and narrow, something that leaned instead of stood proud, something that let the land do half the work. Behind him, a voice called out. "You're really set on that spot, then." Jonah turned. Caleb Morris stood at the edge of the clearing, arms folded, breath fogging thick. Caleb was older by a few years, broader, louder. He had built his shelter in 3 days, logs stacked quick, roof pitched steep. It looked strong from a distance. Jonah had seen the gaps between the seams. "It's sheltered," Jonah said. Caleb snorted. "It's cramped. No sun. Trees that close will drop limbs right through your roof." Jonah looked back at the pines. Snow clung to their branches but did not pile. The wind moved above them, not through them. "They've stood longer than any of us," Jonah said. "They know how to carry weight." Caleb shook his head. "You're going to freeze, kid. Winter doesn't care about clever ideas." Jonah did not argue. He had learned early that explanations wasted heat. When Caleb walked away, Jonah knelt and brushed snow aside with his glove. The soil beneath was dark and dry. He pressed his palm flat against it and waited. The ground held no bite. That afternoon, Jonah began. He did not fell trees first. He marked space, using stakes cut from fallen limbs. He traced a narrow outline between 3 of the largest pines. Not a square, not straight lines. The shape curved slightly inward, following the roots. Where the land rose, he let it. Where it dipped, he noted it. The dog followed him closely, stopping when Jonah stopped, sitting when Jonah knelt. No barking, no wandering, just presence. By dusk, Jonah had cleared only enough snow to expose the earth. No more. He built a small fire at the edge of the hollow and sat with his back to a trunk wide enough that he could not reach around it. The wind moved through the valley like water over stone. Inside the hollow, the air barely stirred. Jonah watched the smoke rise. It did not flatten or twist. It climbed slow and straight before thinning into the branches overhead. That told him more than any words. That night, while others fed their stoves and cursed the cold, Jonah slept beneath canvas, stretched between trees. The dog curled tight against his chest. The fire burned low and went out before midnight. He did not wake shivering. The next days passed in quiet labor. Jonah dug first. Not deep everywhere, only where the frost might reach. He worked until his hands ached and his breath steamed thick. He lined the shallow pit with stone and gravel, layered carefully so moisture would move away instead of linger. Over that, he packed clay, shaping it into a gentle bowl that sloped toward a narrow drain cut by hand. He said nothing about it when others passed. They laughed anyway. One man called it a grave. Jonah let the words drift away like breath in the cold. He laid his floor before his walls. That alone drew more looks. Most people wanted shelter fast. Walls first, roof second, floor whenever there was time. Jonah reversed it. He wanted the ground to work for him, not against him. He smoothed the clay, packed it firm, then covered it with flat stones scavenged from the creek bed, each one tested for fit. When he lit a small fire nearby and waited, the stones warmed slowly, holding the heat even after the flames died. Jonah smiled once, small and private. Next came the frame. He did not notch logs the usual way. Instead, he shaved them to fit tight against each other and against the trees themselves. The pines became part of the structure, not walls, but anchors. Where others cleared land, Jonah leaned into it. The dog learned the rhythm of the work. When Jonah lifted, the dog stayed clear. When Jonah paused, the dog rested. When the axe rang, the dog did not flinch. Snow fell steadily now. One evening, a younger boy from the settlement wandered close. Boots too big, coat too thin. "My mother says you're building wrong," the boy said, staring wide-eyed at the half-formed shape tucked between trunks. Jonah handed him a warm stone from the fire pit. "Hold that," the boy did, eyes widening further. "It's still warm." Jonah nodded. "Ground remembers." The boy frowned, thinking hard. "Will it work?" Jonah looked up at the trees, their branches heavy but calm. "It already is." As days passed, something subtle happened. While other shelters smoked hard all day, Jonah's fire burned less. While others scraped ice from their walls each morning, Jonah found none inside his frame. The air within the hollow felt different, still, dry. Not warm, not yet, but kinder. The dog chose to sleep inside the structure even before it was finished. That mattered most of all. By the time the first true freeze arrived, Jonah had walls and a roof not tall, not wide, but thick and layered. Bark, packed earth, sod laid carefully so weight spread instead of pressed. The door faced east, sheltered by overhanging limbs. A small entry space sat between outer and inner doors, just large enough to pause in, to let cold wait its turn. When the temperature dropped hard one night and the valley woke to cracked boards and frozen hinges, Jonah woke to quiet. The stones beneath his feet still held warmth. The dog stretched and sighed. Jonah sat up slowly, listening. The wind battered the world beyond the trees. Inside the hollow, it lost its voice. Jonah did not feel pride. He felt relief. "Outside," someone shouted. A door slammed. Another voice answered, sharp with worry. Jonah stood, pulled on his coat, and opened the outer door just enough to look. Smoke drifted sideways across the clearing. Men moved fast, fear quickening their steps. Jonah closed the door gently and leaned his forehead against the wood. Winter had arrived, and for the first time since his father's death, Jonah did not feel like he was bracing for loss. He felt ready, The cold did not rush in, it settled. That was the difference Jonah noticed first. After the initial freeze, there was no dramatic change, no sudden collapse of the world. Instead, the valley tightened day by day, like a hand slowly closing. Snow thickened along fence posts. Ice climbed higher on creek stones. Smoke no longer drifted lazily upward but pressed low, flattened by air too heavy to rise. Jonah woke each morning before light, not from fear, from habit. The dog rose with him, stretching once, shaking sleep from its coat, then waiting. Jonah would place his palm against the inner wall, feeling for what the night had taken. The wood remained cool, never biting. The stones beneath the floor still gave back a faint, steady warmth. Enough. Outside the hollow, things were different. Caleb Morris knocked 3 mornings after the freeze. Not hard, not at first, just enough to be heard. Jonah opened the outer door and waited in the small entry space. Cold pressed in, sharp and impatient, but it stopped there. Caleb stood just beyond the threshold, shoulders hunched, face red and tight. "You warm in there?" Caleb asked. Jonah did not answer right away. He stepped aside. Caleb hesitated, then entered. The dog shifted back but did not growl. Caleb paused, eyes adjusting, breath slowing without him noticing. "Feels different," Caleb muttered. Jonah closed the outer door and waited 10 breaths before opening the inner one. Inside, the air held. Caleb swore under his breath. "It's not right." Jonah set water to warm, not hurried, not slow. "It's working." Caleb looked around. No frost on the walls, no smoke clinging to the ceiling, just stillness. He rubbed his hands together once, then stopped. They no longer hurt. "Mine's burning through wood like it's nothing," Caleb said quietly. "Still cold by morning." Jonah nodded. He had expected this. "Your seams," Jonah said. "And your door." Caleb frowned. "They're tight." "Tight isn't sealed," Jonah replied. Caleb stayed only a few minutes more. He did not ask for help. Not yet. But when he left, he did not laugh. Word traveled slowly in winter, but it traveled. Others began to notice small things first. How Jonah did not haul wood every day. How smoke from his roof rose thin and steady instead of thick and frantic. How snow beneath the trees near his shelter stayed shallow even after storms. One man timed it. He stepped from his own cabin at dawn, crossed the clearing, and counted how many steps it took before his breath burned. Then he walked toward Jonah's hollow. It took longer there. No one said anything outright. Not yet. The real test came with the second storm. It arrived without wind, which made it worse. Snow fell heavy and wet, layer upon layer, pressing weight into every weak place. Roofs groaned, posts bowed. By the 3rd night, one shelter collapsed inward, logs splitting under the load. No one was hurt, but the sound carried through the valley like a warning. Jonah listened from his bed platform. The dog pressed along his back. The roof above them held firm. Snow slid from its curve in slow, steady sheets, falling harmlessly into the hollow where the trees caught it. When the storm passed, men stood in the open, staring at damage they had not planned for. That was when they came, not all at once, one at a time. A man with cracked lips asked Jonah to look at his chimney. Another with frozen hinges wanted to know how Jonah kept his door from icing shut. Jonah did not lecture. He showed. He pointed out where cold pooled, where warm air escaped. He marked angles in the snow with a stick. He told them to stop fighting drafts and start slowing them. Some listened. Some did not, but no one laughed anymore. The 3rd freeze was the hardest. The valley dropped into a cold so deep it seemed to swallow sound itself. Trees cracked in the night, sharp as rifle shots. Metal rang when touched. Water froze in buckets beside burning fires. That night, Jonah let his fire die early. He had planned it that way. He lay awake, listening. The dog slept, breathing slow and even. Jonah waited for the cold to creep in, for the familiar ache that meant loss of ground. It never came. The stones beneath the floor released their stored warmth slowly, steadily. The air stayed dry. Jonah's breath did not fog. By morning, the world outside was locked solid. A man from the lower ridge lost 2 fingers to frostbite while repairing a shutter. Another cracked his stovepipe trying to clear ice. Smoke backed up, filling his cabin until he stumbled out coughing, eyes streaming. That afternoon, Jonah heard shouting. He stepped outside and followed the sound toward the clearing. A small crowd had gathered around Caleb's cabin. Smoke poured from the door, thick and wrong. Caleb stood bareheaded in the snow, swearing, hands shaking. Pipe froze, someone said. Nearly lost the place. Jonah stepped forward. He did not push past anyone. He waited until eyes turned to him. "Open everything," Jonah said. Slow, they did. Smoke thinned. The danger passed. Caleb looked at Jonah, something brittle in his expression. "You knew this would happen." Jonah shook his head. "I planned for it." That night, Caleb came again. This time, he did not speak at first. He stepped into the entry space and stood there, head bowed, breathing in warmth he had not felt in days. "Show me," he said finally. "Not how to copy it, how to think about it." Jonah nodded once. They walked the hollow together. Jonah pointed out the way the land dipped, how the trees broke wind before it could reach the walls, where snow never drifted, where frost stayed shallow. "You don't beat winter," Jonah said. "You give it fewer ways in." Caleb listened. Others began to do the same. A narrow entry appeared on one rebuilt cabin, a deeper foundation on another. Roofs lowered, angled. Fires burned slower. The valley did not become safe, but it became smarter. One evening, a woman arrived with a child wrapped tight against her chest. The child was shivering, lips pale. Her cabin's roof had split. She had nowhere to go. Jonah opened his door without a word. The child warmed quickly, the shivering easing, eyes blinking open in surprise. The dog lay beside them, offering quiet comfort. No one spoke of it afterward. They did not need to. By midwinter, paths connected the cabins more clearly, not from habit, but from need. People checked on one another now, shared observations, shared mistakes. Jonah remained quiet through it all. He did not lead. He simply stayed warm, and in a season that punished arrogance and rewarded patience, that was enough to change everything. The cold would deepen yet. The true test had not come, but the valley had begun to learn that winter could be endured, not by strength alone, but by listening. The cold reached a point where it no longer felt sharp. It became heavy instead, pressing down on the valley like a held breath that refused to release. Snow no longer sparkled. It dulled, compacted into hard layers that creaked underfoot. Even sound seemed to travel differently now, absorbed before it could echo. Jonah felt the change before anyone said a word. It came in the way the dog lingered closer to the door each morning, in the way the stones beneath the floor released their warmth more slowly, as if conserving it, in the way the trees groaned deeper at night, not snapping, but shifting under the strain. This was the stretch of winter that broke things, not with drama, with endurance. People stopped counting days. They measured time by fires fed and repairs held. The valley narrowed its focus to essentials: food, heat, sleep, and Jonah's hollow had become a point of reference, whether he wanted it to or not. They did not come asking for shelter at first. They came asking questions. How deep did you dig under the floor? Why does your roof shed snow so clean? How do you keep the smoke from backing up? Jonah answered when asked, briefly, precisely. He never spoke in absolutes, only in reasons. Because of the slope, because of the wind, because the ground holds memory. The dog lay nearby during these exchanges, head on paws, eyes open. People noticed that too. Animals knew warmth before men trusted it. The cold front arrived on a night with no moon. There was no warning, no wind shift, no cloud movement, just a sudden tightening of the air that made breath ache and metal ring. By morning, the valley was locked. Ice glazed every surface. Even the trees seemed caught mid-motion, branches frozen in place. Doors would not open without force. Water froze solid inside covered containers. Fires struggled, starving for air that would no longer move as expected. Jonah rose before dawn, as always. The inside of his shelter remained steady, not warm in a way that invited comfort, but warm enough that his hands moved freely. The dog stretched, shook, and padded to the door, tail low but calm. Jonah opened the outer door just enough to look. The world beyond was brittle. He closed it again and waited. By mid-morning, the first knock came. Not Caleb this time. It was the man from the lower ridge, the one who had lost fingers weeks earlier. His coat was stiff with frost. His beard clinked when he moved. "My fire won't draw," the man said, smokes filling the room. Jonah did not rush. He took his coat, his gloves, stepped into the entry space, and closed the door behind him before opening the inner one. "Show me," he said. They walked together through the frozen air. Jonah listened more than he spoke. He watched how the smoke behaved, how it flattened, how it hesitated. "Your pipe's too straight," Jonah said finally. "Heat's leaving too fast, and the ice, there's nowhere for it to go." The man stared. "I built it the way everyone does," Jonah nodded. "That's the problem." They worked for hours, hands numbing despite gloves. Jonah showed him how to add a bend, how to shield the base from direct wind. When they finished, the smoke rose slow and clean. The man exhaled, long and shaking. "You saved us." Jonah shook his head. "You'll save yourself tomorrow." By afternoon, others were waiting near the edge of the hollow, not crowding, not demanding, just standing, hands tucked into coats, eyes tired. Jonah felt the shift then. This was no longer about curiosity. This was need. That night, the cold dropped further. Someone's roof failed under ice weight. Another man's door split, wood contracting too fast. A family huddled in a root cellar meant for food, not people. Jonah opened his door, not wide, not all at once. One at a time, he let them pause in the entry space, feel warmth return to their hands, slow their breathing. He kept count without marking it. 4, inside. 2, in the entry. The dog moved among them quietly, offering contact without noise. No one spoke loudly. They didn't need to. The shelter held. The stones beneath the floor released heat they had gathered days earlier. The walls breathed, stale air slipping out through narrow channels Jonah had shaped with care. No drafts, no smoke, just a steady balance. A child fell asleep near the wall, head against a rolled coat. The dog lay beside them, body curved protectively. Jonah stayed awake. He sat on the low bench near the back wall, listening, counting breaths, feeling the subtle shifts in temperature as bodies entered and settled. Outside, winter raged without sound. Inside, time slowed. When dawn finally came, pale and thin, the thermometer nailed near the inner wall read just under 70. Jonah did not look at it long. He already knew. People left slowly. Not because they were cold again, but because they needed to tend what remained of their own shelters. They thanked Jonah with nods, with quiet looks, with hands pressed briefly to the warm wall before stepping out. No one joked. No one doubted. The valley had crossed a line. From that day on, Jonah was no longer just a boy building differently. He was a point of stability in a season that punished mistakes. That weight settled on him gradually. He felt it in the way people waited for him to speak first, in the way Caleb watched him during repairs, measuring decisions, in the way conversations hushed when Jonah stepped near. He did not seek it, but he did not step away from it either. The deepest cold lasted 5 days. 5 days where the temperature never rose enough to soften ice. 5 days where fires burned constantly and still failed in places they never had before. Jonah's shelter held, not perfectly, not effortlessly, but consistently. He rationed heat, fed the fire only when needed, shifted stones where warmth gathered too much in one place, opened vents slightly when bodies crowded the air. He worked quietly, constantly. The dog never left his side. On the fourth night, a crack split the valley, a sound like a tree breaking, but deeper. Jonah was on his feet instantly. He grabbed his coat, opened the door, and followed the sound toward the ridge. The dog ran ahead, stopping only to check Jonah's pace. They found the damage quickly. A cabin had failed, not collapsed, but twisted. A support beam had cracked, the roof sagging dangerously. Inside, a man and his wife worked frantically, trying to prop it up with whatever they could find. "Out," Jonah said, voice calm but firm. They hesitated. "Now," Jonah repeated. They obeyed. Jonah assessed the structure in seconds. The crack, the load, the direction of strain. "You can't save this tonight," he said. "You'll get crushed trying." The man's face crumpled. "We'll freeze." Jonah shook his head. "You won't." He led them back to the hollow. The shelter accepted them without complaint. That night, more people slept beneath Jonah's roof than ever before. They lay shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in furs and coats, breath steady, fear eased. Jonah stayed awake until the last one settled. When he finally lay down, the dog pressed close, grounding him. For the first time since winter began, Jonah felt tired in a way that sleep alone would not fix, but he also felt something else. Not pride, responsibility. The cold began to loosen its grip on the sixth day, not by retreating, but by easing pressure. The air lifted slightly. Ice cracked instead of held. Smoke began to rise again instead of flatten. The valley survived, not intact, not unchanged, but alive. People stepped out of their shelters cautiously, like animals after a storm. They assessed damage, counted losses, helped one another without being asked. They looked toward Jonah's hollow often. He did not stand in the doorway. He worked, repairing, advising, carrying stones, showing how to angle a beam so it bore weight instead of resisting it. The valley began to rebuild, not from scratch, but from understanding. Winter had not been beaten, but it had been answered. And Jonah, the quiet boy who listened to the ground before lifting a tool, stood at the center of that answer without ever claiming it as his own. Winter did not end the way people expected. There was no sudden thaw, no rushing water, no triumphant sun. Instead, the cold loosened its grip, the way an old injury does slowly, reluctantly, one stiff joint at a time. Mornings grew brighter by minutes. Ice cracked instead of held. Snow softened enough to take a footprint without splintering. Jonah noticed the change in the trees first. The pines in the hollow began to shed their load in heavier drops. Snow slid from branches in soft avalanches, thudding harmlessly to the ground. The trunks no longer groaned at night. They rested. The dog lifted its head more often, ears turning toward distant sounds that had been swallowed for weeks. Birds returned cautiously, testing the air with short calls before committing. The valley breathed again. Jonah stood at the threshold of his shelter one morning and let the door stay open longer than usual. Cold still lingered, but it no longer rushed in like an enemy. It moved like a guest who knew its time was ending. Behind him, the stones beneath the floor still held warmth, though less was needed now. The shelter had done its work, so had Jonah. He did not think of it that way. To him, the season had been a long problem that required patience, nothing more. But to the valley, something had shifted. People moved differently now, slower, more deliberate. Fires burned lower, fed with intention rather than fear. Cabins showed subtle changes, narrower entries, deeper foundations, roofs adjusted not for height, but for balance. Children played again, bundled but laughing, their voices carrying through the trees. The sound felt fragile at first, as if it might break, but it held. Jonah repaired what needed repairing. He replaced cracked beams, helped reseat doors warped by cold, showed where to pack clay and where to leave space. He did not oversee. He assisted. When someone asked why he built the way he did, Jonah answered the same every time. I watched what stayed warm without trying. By early thaw, the valley gathered without planning it, not in a circle, not for a speech. They simply found themselves standing near the hollow one afternoon, tools resting idle, conversation drifting to silence. Caleb stood among them, the man from the lower ridge, the woman whose child had slept beside the wall, others whose names Jonah knew only from winter's urgency. No one spoke at first. Finally, Caleb cleared his throat. You're not leaving, are you? Jonah looked up, surprised. Why would I? Caleb shrugged. Men like you usually do. Build something that works, then move on. Jonah shook his head. This works because it's here. That seemed to settle something. They did not ask him to lead. They did not offer thanks in words. Instead, they brought materials, better tools, extra hands when Jonah needed them. They reinforced the path through the hollow, careful not to disturb roots. Without discussion, the place became shared ground, not owned, respected. As the snow retreated, the land revealed what winter had hidden. Some cabins would need rebuilding entirely, others only small corrections. No one rushed. They remembered how rushing had failed them. Jonah walked the valley with the dog at his side, noting where water pooled, where frost lingered longest. He shared those observations when asked. Sometimes, children followed him. They did not interrupt. They watched how he stepped, where he paused. He showed them how to feel the ground through boots, how to tell if soil held moisture or memory. One boy asked, "How do you know where to build?" Jonah knelt, pressed his hand to the earth, and waited. "The land tells you," he said, "if you give it time." Spring arrived not with color, but with sound. Water began to move beneath ice. Drips turned to trickles. The creek whispered louder each day. Moss showed itself in dark patches on stones. The shelter in the hollow changed too. Its roof sprouted green, first thin shoots pushing through the sod. Flowers followed, small and stubborn. From a distance, the structure looked less like something built and more like something grown. Jonah liked that. One morning, Caleb brought a plank and set it carefully beside the entry. He carved words into it slowly, awkwardly. Jonah watched, but did not stop him. When Caleb finished, he hesitated. "You don't have to keep it." Jonah read the words. They were simple. No names, just a reminder of how the place was meant to be used. He nodded once. "It can stay." The plank was set beside the path, half hidden by needles. It did not draw attention. Years passed. Winters came and went. None as brutal as that first one, but none taken lightly again. The valley built better, smarter. Children grew into adults who knew how to read wind and snow without being told why it mattered. Jonah remained. His hair darkened, then threaded with gray. His hands grew thicker, steadier. The dog aged alongside him, moving slower but still choosing the warmest place by instinct. The shelter held. Its walls weathered, but did not loosen. The floor stayed dry. The air inside remained clear, never stale. People came and went, but always with the same care, pausing in the entry, closing one door before opening the next. It became habit. One winter, long after the valley had forgotten fear, a young family arrived late, too late. Their wagon broke near the ridge as snow began to fall hard. They were guided to the hollow without question. They stayed the season. In spring, when they asked where to build, Jonah walked with them, just as he had walked with others long ago. He did not point to the hollow. "This place is already spoken for," he said gently. He showed them where the land bent kindly elsewhere. When Jonah grew old, it happened quietly. He did not fall ill. He did not suffer. He simply moved slower each season, rested longer, spoke less. One winter, he did not walk the valley as much. The dog stayed close, always. One morning, the door did not open. They found Jonah seated on the low bench near the back wall, head bowed as if resting. The shelter was warm. The air was clear. The dog lay beside him, unharmed, breathing steady. They did not rush. They understood, then, what the place had always been. They buried Jonah where the wind first softened each spring, beneath a young pine planted carefully, roots packed with the same clay Jonah had trusted for decades. They did not mark the grave with stone. They did not need to. The shelter remained. It was never claimed, never sold, never altered beyond care. It stood as it always had, low, patient, listening. Children were taught there. Travelers rested there. Winters passed without panic. The valley remembered, not Jonah's name. Always. Names fade, but the way he built, the way he listened, the way he showed that survival was not about force, but about understanding when to lean, when to wait, and when to let the land carry you. And every winter, when the snow came quietly in the night, the hollow held its warmth, just as it always had.